Today I'm going to redo one of my oldest recipes. I first did this back in 2010 and it was one of my earliest videos. I'm going to change it because I never really liked the way it was done. There was just one thing about it that I didn't care for. It's a good recipe and I'm well known for it. Other people have made it and they love it. I got the idea from an early episode of a BBC cooking series called Two Fat Ladies. Jennifer Patterson and Clarissa Dixon Wright, both since passed away. Wonderful series of cooking videos. Anyways, this is steelhead trout that I buy at Costco. It's the only farmed fish that I enjoy. I love the flavor of it. Most farmed fish has no flavor, but I like the flavor of this steelhead, and I'm going to be making it with tomatoes and mushrooms and then making a cream sauce afterwards. So first I got to get some prep work done. I have some Roma tomatoes here. You need about 4 to 6 depending upon size. I'm going to use 4 because these are very big tomatoes, and what I'm going to do is pierce them with a fork, submerge them in boiling water to loosen the skin so I can peel them and then seed them. So as you can see, the water has come to a boil. I put enough water in this pan to submerge these tomatoes completely under the boiling water, and all I'm doing basically here is just cooking the flesh right under that skin, and that'll help that skin to release. Only takes about 15-20 seconds or so. Sometimes you even see the skin split. See, there it is, split. That one's ready to go. All right, now that the skin is loosened, it just peels right off. So I have 4 of these to do, and then I can start seeding them. Got my tomatoes peeled now, and I'm going to seed them, cut down through the middle. And I learned from somebody else's video that the juice in here has got a lot of flavor to it. So I'm going to capture this juice. The video said use that in your dish. It'll just add more flavor. I don't have a lot here, but why waste it if it's supposedly that good? Okay, then after I get the seeds out, I'm just going to kind of coarsely chop this. I don't really have to be too fussy about that. And put that in a bowl that I have to the side here and keep working with my other tomatoes. I'm just finishing the tomatoes here. And one thing I can mention is a lot of people, they'll squeeze the tomato to squeeze the juice out. That works as well. And I do that if I don't care about the texture of the tomatoes. Like if I'm making a spaghetti sauce, a marinara, I don't care about maintaining the texture. But if I do want to maintain the texture of the tomato for my finished dish, then I won't crush it. I'll just help the seeds out with a paring knife so that they're all still relatively firm for when I cook them. Okay, my tomatoes are done. Those are done. So now, using a spatula, not quite a spatula, this is more of a spoon, I'm going to force as much of this juice out as I can. There's my tomato juice. I'll add that to my tomatoes. Next I can work on my mushrooms. For mushrooms, I'm using the white mushrooms, common mushrooms that are in the store. You need 3 to 4 depending upon how big they are. These are fairly good size, so I'm using 4. I'm going to slice these up. You can chop them up coarsely. If they're small, I think they look good if they're chopped up. But for these, I'm going to slice them up. I did give these a good wash. I know some people say you mustn't ever wash mushrooms. They should be brushed clean with a camel hair brush, the hairs of which have come from the youngest camels in the most exotic spaces in the Sahara Desert. Yeah, whatever. I wash them, and it hasn't killed me yet. I've got to julienne some basil. So I've put some basil, I bought some basil, put it in water. Try to keep this as fresh as long as possible. And I'm going to pluck off the bitter leaves. I want a big leaf on the bottom. This is a trick that I learned from a chef. Put the smaller leaves on top. I'll do some more of that in a bit. Here's another trick. Notice how this has got a white blade. This is a ceramic knife. Supposedly, and I think it's true, that the metal blade makes the basil turn dark, but it'll stay greener if you use a non-metal blade like a ceramic blade. So you put the leaves all on top of one another like that, then you kind of roll it up into a cylinder so it looks like a little green cigar, or maybe a doobie if you're one of those, and then cut it into julienne, which are kind of like little strings. I think of that as being a julienne, really fine cuts like that, where it's little threads. That's a chiffonade, but I don't need a chiffonade for this. Chiffonade is like good for tossing into a salad or on top of a soup. I'm just going to cut these into strings. Julienne. I'm going to do a few more leaves. You don't need much, maybe 5 to 6 basil leaves. So there's my steelhead right there. You can see by the color that it looks like salmon. I think a lot of people probably think that it is salmon in the case. This is about 1¼ pounds, which is 570 grams. You can go a little bit more, 1½ pounds, 680 grams. It doesn't really matter. Again, this is a farmed fish, and I think it's got a nice flavor to it. I do leave the skin on. Some people get freaked out by the skin. I think it makes it easier to turn in the pan, and the skin comes off really easily later. I am going to cut this in half. I'm not going to go directly in half. I'm actually going to cut it this way because these pieces will fit better inside the pan, because they'll be sort of like that, kind of rounded in the pan. Okay, I want to season these. I washed my hands after touching that raw fish, so I'm just going to sprinkle them lightly with salt and pepper. There's the salt. I'll grind some black pepper on there. Not much. Good enough. That's ready to cook. I've got a skillet here heating on the stove. I'm going to put in a couple tablespoons of olive oil. This is cooking olive oil. I don't like to cook with extra virgin because it burns at a lower temperature. But for this dish, because I'm not going to be cooking at a very high temperature, you could use extra virgin. And then I'm squeezing a clove of garlic in there. And then, this is going to freak some people out. Yes. I'm putting in a couple of anchovy fillets. Some people get freaked out with the idea of anchovies, but they disappear into the dish. They will eventually break down and practically melt into the dish. And I think they add a nice flavor to the dish. And I'm also adding 1/4 cup of marsala. You can use a dry sherry, dry red wine. And then I'm just going to cook that down. Again, those fillets will eventually break down. And I'm going to kind of cook this down until I have roughly half of the liquid here. Okay, next I'm going to add the juice from the tomatoes, because I want to cook this down as well. Again, bring that up to a boil and cook that down. That is reduced down quite a bit. So now I'm going to add the fish, and I'm going to put it in skin side up to start off with. You can see how nicely that fits in the pan. I'm going to raise my heat a little bit here, and I'm going to cook this for 4 to 5 minutes. My timer just went off, so I'm ready to turn these over. I'm going to try to scoot that other one over, and then carefully flip these over. Ooh, look at that. That's looking beautiful already. All right. So those can finish cooking. I'm going to turn the heat down a little bit more and put the tomatoes around the pan. Some of my mushrooms around the side. These are so big, these mushrooms, I may not use them all. That looks pretty good right there. And then I'm going to sprinkle my basil on there. Julienne basil. Okay, put a cover on that, and I'm going to let that cook for about 4 minutes. I have some Italian parsley here that, again, I've been keeping in water to try to keep it fresh. I pulled the leaves off a few sprigs, and I'm just going to give this a coarse chop. I'm just going to use this for garnish. My fish has to cook for another 30 seconds, so we're about ready to start plating. Oh yeah, I got to finish the sauce though. There's my chopped parsley for garnish. Okay, I reduced my heat to low on this, and I did cook this a little bit longer. I'm removing this slowly so I don't fog my camera lens, because I wanted to make sure those mushrooms would be fairly tender. Let's see what they're like. Yeah, that's good. I'm going to transfer these to a platter, and then I'm going to transfer the fish to the platter. Okay, I'm bringing the heat back up again under this, and I'm adding 1/2 cup, which is about, what's that, 120 milliliters of heavy cream. Stir that in. I'm actually going to whisk that in. And I'm going to bring this to the boil and just reduce it a little bit. Meanwhile, I've covered the fish and tomatoes and mushrooms with foil. Let that sit for just a couple of minutes until I'm ready with the sauce. I turned the heat off under this because it was looking just about right. I'm almost positive this is going to need some salt. So I have my red handled tasting spoon out. Yep, that's definitely going to need some salt. Put a pinch of salt in there. And that sauce should be ready. Can take my foil off. Isn't that beautiful? Look at that. And then I'm going to put my sauce just on the fish. I don't want to cover the tomatoes and mushrooms much. That's enough. I don't have to use it all. And one thing to do before serving is to garnish the plate and the fish with some chopped fresh parsley. And that is ready to taste. So I cut a little piece for myself. It's a late lunch. I know pretty much what this is going to taste like, but this is the first time I've made this with a cream sauce rather than the old way, which was to use some mascarpone, which just basically melts into an oil. Wonderful. Nice flavor. I like that fish. My mushroom and tomato. That's a wonderful dish. If you wanted to, you could make some rice pilaf to go with this. Summertime, you could cook up some corn on the cob. That would be good with a dish like this. It's kind of fancy though, so I think a fancy side dish would do. I love the flavor of this fish. Okay, excuse me. I'm going to go enjoy my steelhead with mushroom and tomatoes. To view the recipe and download a PDF version with step-by-step photographs, click the Jump to Recipe icon in the lower right corner or visit my website, mobilehomegourmet.com.